All righty. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the next question and answer session on nihilistic materialism. And just before we start, I am happy to announce my website is updated. So I'll put a link below. So if you are interested in the class, a lot of people have contacted me. More information is up. Some people have already signed up, which is great. Thank you very much for that. Actually, now you have a link where you can do things like pay. It's all going to be very efficient in theory. So hopefully all the information you need is up at the website. I will put the link in the description below. So thanks very much. All right, Jeremy, hit me with these great questions. Let's see what's going on here.
All right. Good evening, Wes. The first question is from TF9, and this is a historical question. It says, I would say that immediately after World War II, it wasn't nearly as clear that liberal capitalism was the obvious winner. And this person is referencing communism and that the resistance during World War II had a lot to do with communist resistance, and also that the USSR had so many losses in World War II and ended up ultimately winning. So what are your thoughts on if liberal capitalism was sort of the clear, obvious winner?
Oh, yeah. So what I meant, and that's a great question, by the way. Thank you very much for that's why I'm really enjoying this question and answers thing. I hope you guys are too. Thank you, Jeremy. It's so helpful because this is a great moment of clarifying, like something I should have probably stated more clearly, which is, again, this is from American cultural history. So from the American perspective, right, communism equals bad. America won the war with our model. And a lot of the world did go along with this. But if you look at the division of the post-war world, what you really see is three major factions. You have the sort of, okay, America won, and we're going to go with that program, Australia, occupation of Japan, the non-occupied Western Europe as opposed to Eastern Europe behind the Iron Curtain, which developed, of course, over about a decade. All those factions. So you have that what we call sort of the American-centric faction. Then you had the Soviet faction, which, of course, in Soviet Union, Eastern Europe. And then, of course, when China goes communist, this makes communism look a little more threatening and more popular. And then you have the Organization of Non-Aligned States, which is sort of a forgotten remnant of history, but was really, when you look at the historical balance, they were a significant player, and they were people who were trying to, let's not be communist, let's not follow the American model, let's see if we can negotiate our way in between this somehow. And so there were definitely three different routes. From the American perspective, though, once you decide you aren't going to be communist, which we decided pretty early that this was not the path we were going to choose, then you go, oh, this is against the beginning of the Cold War. Not only are we not going to be communists, we're going to actively fight them all over the world for good and ill, mostly for ill, I would say. But, that was the idea, and that our way of life, which is, just sprung into being during the war, sort of magically, was now under threat. Our world position, our global economic dominance, and all of that. So certainly, if you were outside the United States, you could say, oh, let's sidle up to Yugoslavia and the sort of non-aligned nations and India, these other powers, and try and see if we can't negotiate some sort of different place in the world. But from the American perspective, it was, we won, everybody else is the enemy, and if you don't adopt our system, you're just foolish. And of course, as that played out and then the Soviet Union collapses, we had the big, celebratory lap, and like, okay, see, we told you American materialism is the only possible way to go forward. Nothing else will give people a life worth living. And so that strong tendency just got, highlighted, underlined, and circled in bright green or whatever. So, but yeah, so that I think you're absolutely true. From the rest of the world's perspective, there were, varying choices that one could pursue. And a lot of countries tried to pursue a middle path with relative degrees of success.
Okay. And how about in Western Europe? Were Western Europeans on the fence about, should we go with this American plan, or there's this communist plan that was kind of a strong resistance.
Yeah, I mean, this gets into like country by country history, but
Okay.
part of it is, so in France you had de Gaulle was very specifically anti-communist, and they were a very strong president. In fact, communists still get like 15% of the vote here. So like, and I mean, they're like communists, not like pretend communists, but like they're communists. Still gets 15% of the vote because the resistance in France was very strongly, had a big faction that was backed by the communists, by the Soviet Union, and so that was a big question in post-war France, was where the communists had enough power to take over. But de Gaulle kind of killed that one in the crib, and so France was definitely pursuing a more Western American style, but they were kind of doing their own thing. Of course, Germany gets divided, so that sort of solves, that answers its own question. Italy still had a very strong communist faction there. They fought it out for a long time, but again, less pronounced than the United States. But basically, the United States bribed them and paid them and did everything they could to kind of keep Italy on side. And so, while communist politically was much stronger in Western Europe than is often recognized historically, no, I'm trying to think if anybody went actually post-war that wasn't occupied, if they actually went communist. I don't think anybody did, although there were a few pretty the communists definitely had some coalition governments and such like this. But yeah, and part of what happened is Stalin was such a nasty piece of work that a lot of the credibility they could have had, if they just weren't so awful, kind of poisoned the well there. And as that came out, and as intellectuals and the press became increasingly aware of just how awful Stalin was, that sort of looked increasingly bad, basically.
Okay. TFN has a follow-up question in his same question. It says, I would also push back on defining the USA as isolationist by that point. It had a whole slew of colonies and territories it had gained, and the Monroe Doctrine had been in place for a good while. What about that?
So yeah, absolutely, it's a valid point. How to make this distinction again? Yeah, you only have so much time in these lectures. Puerto Rico, right? Ask any American what is up with Puerto Rico, and they will have no idea whatsoever, even today, right? So it's not that the U.S. didn't have a presence overseas. It's not the U.S. didn't try to establish colonies overseas. It's not that we didn't sort of get late into the game of colonialism. I mean, Japan, China, we had a protectorate in China. We did all that. However, if you look at our military, so I'm going to do a whole episode on this, by the way. So more of this is coming. If you look at our pre-World War II military spending, military overseas bases, commitments overseas, et cetera, America was an incredibly isolationist country. There's just no, I mean, we had lots of merchant interests, but even that was highly fragmented and tended to be more private than like governmental. So I'll go through the numbers on that, so that it's not that we had zero presence, but you can look at someone like Teddy Roosevelt, and he was definitely like, let's be out in the world, let's be aggressive, let's be involved. But he was an outlier in that. I mean, he was even for his time, the Republicans were like, yeah, I don't know. There was a let's go take Canada faction of parties, right? Like, hey, we've got Alaska, we've got the United States, it's a sandwich, let's eat the middle. And Hawaii, Hawaii became a state. All these things are happening, but this is really taking place at the political elite level. And there's just the population and politically not a huge presence, and it even sank, so that by the time you get into the 30s, and the World War I experience was not generally positive, although the war was won. The post-war world was not all that great for American, like, okay, we're going to be expansionist and all that. And so yeah, I would say predominantly, and certainly, but if you look at spending, investment, ambassadors, all this relative to any other major power in the world, we were very isolationist.
All right. The second question is from Norman, and Norman's question is, did fascists and communists also promote middle class values? So with the Nazis, he points to wealthy industrialists supporting Nazis, and also to Nazi policy trying to improve the regular lives of common people, like improved cleanliness, better hygiene, proper work attire, creating changing rooms and lockers for people working out, better air, less noise in factories. These seem sort of like bourgeois ideas, and
Yeah.
we can communism later, but yeah.
Yeah, both this works for both communism and fascism in different ways. But this is a great question, by the way. Thank you. And this is one of those things we struggle with, because this is the problem with values. So basically, this is why I love philosophy, is our values are so inculcated into us that it's hard to imagine that other people really didn't have those values. Like they must have had them in some form or other or something. And fascism and communism were specifically, aggressively, and systematically opposed to basically every aspect of middle class values. So famously, a lot of industrialists backed Hitler. And because they're like, okay, this guy's a bit of a nutter, but he's going to spend money on the military. He's going to rebuild Germany. This is going to be great for us, and we can control him. And there's I can't remember. Anyways, a famous moment when I think it was Krupp's, and Krupp's huge, builder of guns and everything involving metal, and like I think Siemens and Bayer and like all the big industrialists are at this big mansion. I think it was the Krupp's mansion, and Hitler's coming, and they're all like, okay, we're going to sit down with him, we're going to have dinner, and we're going to say, all right, hey, look, we like your policies here, let's talk about that, we've got money for this, we can give you a nice house over there, and this is all going to be great, and we helped you take power, and so let's just have a negotiation and a chat here about the future. And they said Hitler rolled in with his SS guards, standing behind him with machine guns, sat at the head of the table and harangued them for 90 minutes about what they were going to do for Germany, got up and left. And they were like, wow, like he does not care. He will absolutely, he just does not care about us. I mean, he cares to the extent that they produce stuff. And as long as they kept producing stuff, that was great. The second they said like, oh, hey, we really don't know about this invading, Soviet Union. That seems like a bit of a stretch. Okay, sure. We'll kill you and just get somebody else to run your factory. We have no problem with that. It's like, right. Oh, no, I think I'll keep running my factory. Another example is that, all of the things that you mentioned was for a greater Germany. You need healthy Germans, because healthy Germans make a healthy Germany. And healthy Germany is what it's all about. It's national socialism. That's the end part of Nazism. And it is the notion that you are best when your country is strong and mighty and healthy. So the fact that we have to, torture you in a prison camp to make the country strong, you should be happy about that. Right? It shouldn't bother you that this is what needs to happen, because it's not about any individual. We don't care about individuals. And so that core, the one that's easiest maybe for us to feel, is, individual rights make individuals healthy. They do not care about the individual. You are a cog in a machine. And the idea is that you're happiest when you're a healthy cog in a big, strong, powerful machine. And at the end of the war, when it's clear that they're losing and Berlin is being surrounded, Hitler said, hey, blow all the dams, drown all the people who are in the bomb shelters of Berlin, kill them all, right? Germans, kill all the Germans who are in the bomb shelters of Germany and in Berlin. And, we look at that and we go, well, that's, this is horrifying, right? What a horrible, horrible thing to do. But Hitler was like, well, they failed. They failed. They have no use. They have no utility to Germany, because we're going to lose the war. And so you may as well just kill all the German people, because that's just, if you're going to lose, just, because individuals as individuals just simply don't matter. Another great example, or two more, and then I'll stop waffling on, but it's such a powerful and important question to realize that people can have this. This is the Mao suit, right? The Mao suit, which is everybody is going to be dressed the same.
Mm.
Why? To get rid of individualism, right? The individual, we're opposed to the notion of an individual, that kind of personal expression, self-representation, thought about fashion, and any sense of being different from your neighbor is literally what they're opposed to. So if you think about how much time we spend in the West thinking about being an individual and how important that is, I don't know, it's so powerfully wrong.
Right.
And there's a moment, one of the times recently that I've cried while reading a novel was A Gentleman in Moscow, great novel, Immortals, that's right, yeah. And there's a scene in there where the Soviets, the communists have taken over, and they take over this great hotel that he lives in Moscow, hence A Gentleman in Moscow. And they take the wine cellar and they remove all the labels from all the bottles. And so when he says he'd like to order this particular wine, the guy says, no, we only have white and red.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, no, you have this fabulous cellar of this, super high, what used to be a 4-star hotel, of course, has this incredible wine cellar and all these wines to choose from. Mm-hmm. And he goes down, and the guy says, no. And they go down there, and he shows him that the labels have been removed from all the wine. There's only white and there's only red.
Mm-hmm.
And what this does, and why it's such a powerful, amazing scene, is it removes all the history of the wine. So the terroir, who produced it, where it was produced, any capacity to distinguish flavor, or it just eliminates history, place, belonging, individuality, culture, heritage. And for the individual, it eliminates any possibility of knowledge, insight, connoisseurship, appreciation, variation, right? Like, oh, you like this kind of wine, I like that kind of wine. We can talk about that. It's all gone.
Yeah.
So the individuality and the history and the culture is made impossible. It's
right.
like they want it to be impossible for you or me or anybody to express their individuality.
Mm-hmm.
Again, 1984, of course, goes on at length, right? It's not about it is about eliminating your capacity to be an individual. That's the ultimate goal. And so amongst other values, that is just the one that really stands out. Like, you're like, wow, kill the individual. And if you think of middle class values and freedoms and choice and all that, like, consumer choice and voting and expressing yourself and be yourself, and all that individuality stuff that I talked about 2 lectures ago is like verboten. So,
right.
Yeah. So to the extent, but to make this more subtle, of course, they were societies that had huge middle class traditions. They had bourgeois values, and so that doesn't go away overnight. But this is why Pol Pot killed everybody who had or tried to kill everybody who had glasses or who could read. One way to get rid of middle class values is to kill anybody who might have anything to do with that. So he exterminated whatever percentage of the Cambodian population who, just let's get rid of literacy, because that's just ruins society, all this education and knowledge. So,
right. And with communist Russia, what's the deal with the suit and tie? Like, you imagine Stalin and there's this kind of bougie looking outfit. Why did they maintain that in posters and then in the
but it was a set bougie looking outfit.
Okay.
Right. So it was just, this is the official dress of the Kremlin. Right.
Yeah.
And in fact, this is one of the things that people talked about, is that the Kremlin elite did sort of start developing their own ability so that they could be recognized. Same thing happened in Mao's China. Like, oh, well, you're a general, but you got a Mao suit. Well, how do people know I'm a general? Oh, well, we'll give you a little thing that says you're a general on your shoulder. Well, then pretty soon, of course, the next thing you know, you've got fashion and style again, right? Here we go.
Was it a little bit of a nod to middle class values, like kind of trying to trick people, like, we're normal, yeah, we still wear regular clothes, like a way to hide this detesting individualism?
By the time you got to Stalin, he did not care. I mean, once you get the show trials, it's all over, right? Yeah.
All right. The next couple questions are about naming and kind of nomenclature. There were a couple of them. Bugle Pong asks, shouldn't this be called religious materialism? Certainly the consumerist behavior is based on a material mindset, but the focus on material means it's not nihilistic, meaning it's not nothing, it's on material. It's often called nihilistic because it's contrasted with faith or other non-material pursuits, but this is misplaced. What we have been seeing during the peak of physical wealth is religious materialism. Consuming is a moral good.
Yeah, but by the way, great. Well, nomenclature arguments are always tricky. At some point, you're like, okay, let's just. I hate arguing about definitions, but this is a great question. This is a great insight question. I actually thought I didn't think of religious materialism, although I like that name too. I always thought of spiritual materialism at first, and I pondered that. But I think this is the same idea that you're talking about here. And I pondered that at length. And what I decided, which is certainly arguable, so I'm not saying this is an absolute, perfectly true statement, but the difference, I think, and why I decided on nihilism is religion works a lot better. I guess it's having non-material goals somehow makes it, better for people. So, like, Islam is organized 1 billion people in the world and gives them something to believe in and gives them a sense of self and gives them a sense of community. In some ways, it seems more successfully. Catholicism, historically, Buddhism, all your big isms, not all, by the way, not all religions are faith-based, but if we focus on faith-based religions, I do think that our materialism has taken on these components of faith, but because it's incarnated in material, we're continually disappointed. This is the beautiful thing about having a God you don't have access to, or you have, very remote access, let it say, is you can't be that disappointed because it was always kind of amorphous and vague anyway. But if you buy something and it's disappointing, it really is. It's like, I was thinking of it, the example, maybe this is helpful or not, but the example that made me switch from spiritual materialism to nihilistic materialism was every time some new spiritual guru comes along and says, well, I'm the second coming of Jesus, or I'm the new incarnation of the Buddha, or whatever. And then either they do something terrible, sleep with all their followers, steal all the money from the whatever, exploit something, or they die without anything amazing happening. And people go, oh, well, that was no good. Right.
Yeah.
Or the millenarious tradition of where they go, oh, the world's going to end next Wednesday at noon. And they're always, in the United States, if you're not from the United States, there's always some group that is telling you exactly what date the world is going to end on. We love millenarianism. I don't know why, but we do. We love it. Actually, I do know historically some of the reasons, but basically we're addicted to millenarianism. So there's always some groups around telling you, isn't this true, Jeremy? Like, yeah, they're always coming up with some reason now. Oh, this time it really is going to end on Wednesday at noon. And then it doesn't, and it's kind of varied. You're like, oh, well, that's kind of really depressing. So
yeah,
the notion that Jesus might come back is somehow vastly more fulfilling and helpful and gives you a better spiritual focus, apparently, just by functionality, than materialism. And so I thought that materialism is like the repeated failure of the world to end, or the repeated failure of this guru to really be the incarnation of Vishnu. This time he really is Vishnu, right? Like, oh no, he's not Vishnu again, god damn it, right? Like it's maybe next time it'll be Vishnu. And this, I feel like, oh, maybe that next TV, that this one was big, and I mean, good Lord, it was big, but the one that's as big as a wall, that's the one. That one is really gonna fill my life with joy and beauty and satisfaction.
Right.
And so that pattern is why I decided against spiritualism, or religious, I think is fair, rather than, nihilism rather than spiritualism or religious. But I do think it's a great, I was on the fence. So so yes, to your question, I think it's a great question. There are all these faith elements to it, but I think it also made me actually rethink religion a lot, because I'm like, oh yeah, like you really don't want God to come back because it's going to be unhelpful. This, by the way, Dostoevsky and the brothers Karamazov has this, where Jesus comes back and the church makes him go away because he's not allowed to do that. And the Grand Inquisitor tells him, like, Jesus is like, no, but I'm Jesus. And the Grand Inquisitor is like, I know, I know you're Jesus, but go away. You can't do this. This messes up the whole program, right?
Right. Yeah, I haven't read that one, but I'll
Yeah.
look into it.
By the way, it's a standalone section called the Grand Inquisitor section of the Brothers Karamazov, because Brothers K is a very big book, excellent book, of course. But if you want to just read this short section, it's maybe 20-ish pages, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant, but it raises this point. Oh no, Jesus, you can't come back. That messes everything up. And it's like,
right.
it kind of does, doesn't it? It doesn't work.
Okay. Yeah. The next question kind of takes issue with the word materialism, because in philosophy there's a whole field of materialism that kind of is talking about something else, maybe, or maybe it's related. So this person says, I think it would be best to say consumerism or nihilistic consumerism. Materialism is a whole field of philosophy.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, because it is going to resonate differently. If you've studied a lot of philosophy, it's going to resonate differently. But the reason I kind of like it, even despite that resonance, and that is absolutely a fair point, is consumerism. I think I mean, we're absolutely consumers. So like, I want to say too much emphasis on the consumer, but I don't know if you can put too much emphasis on the consumer in America. Like we are the consumer in consumerism, right? As a society. But
yeah,
I think the actual physical, if we go back to Democritus and the early materialists who said there is a physical foundation to the universe. And I think in shaping the American world experience, the physicality of the United States, of course, free land, the availability of resources. I mean, the United States is we produce more oil than Saudi Arabia, more wood than I think anybody, more food than anybody, more, if you just look at the gross raw materiality of the United States, it's just crazy. And so I do think that underneath the consumerism, underneath the money, underneath all of this is this real lived physical visceral experience that Americans have had with bigness, vastness, endlessness, seeming resource, like just without in. Of course, this is wrong. I'm not saying that this is correct. Like, hello, global warming. Hello, finite resources. Hello, collapsing fisheries. So I'm not saying this is true, but I'm saying as a physical, historical, psychological, experiential moment, American history has been dramatically shaped by this just hyperabundance. And again, if we were in any doubt, during the war, that hyperabundance, that real physical, like Democritus, there is physical shit that underlies all this. Of course, we're not taking it to that kind of abstract level of a Democritus or a Heraclitus, but
right.
we are basically going, no. Look, so for instance, I've had many discussions with people about deconstruction, and one of the things that they tell you is like, well, if you kick a rock, it's a rock. You can't deconstruct that. It's there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's the American, because it's deconstruction is a French philosophical school, but that's almost this immediate like recourse to the physical, like, oh, the physical real, like you can't doubt that this is the real. Like if you can't deconstruct a desk because you can hit it with your fist. Or people say, well, if I throw you out of a window, can you deconstruct the fall?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like the physical material reality of the universe is dominant, and we have the best most of it, so we are dominant. So yeah, despite the resonance, I do want to stick with materialism, although again, like with the religious one, absolutely fair point. And I would love to sit around and have several glasses of wine and discuss that at great length, because I think many insights could come from it. So from both of them, actually. So yeah, again, great questions.
And that last question was from Ricardo. And also just the word consumerism is so familiar. Like as soon as you hear consumer culture, we already have a bunch of ideas. So I kind of like that you swapped that out for materialism, because it made me step back, and Ricardo's question actually made me think about it. So good question.
Yeah, excellent question.
Yeah. So we're going to move off of the nomenclature questions and go to a question from Grace that asks, has this nihilistic materialism been a chain reaction that began in the Renaissance? So I thought this was a good question historically. Like, is there some connection to America that you can kind of, and individualism in America that you can track all the way back to when people started coming down the roads to the main towns to make markets and all of these things that we associate with the Renaissance? Was this sort of like we're the ultimate inevitable result of something like that? Or is there no relationship really to
No,
that kind of thinking about it?
another spectacular question. Certainly, I mean, this is, like I said, all cultures have been or will be materialist at some level. The great thing that you saw in the fluorescence of the Renaissance was a celebration of material culture. And again, this was in part because of agricultural advances, the passing of problems, all this sort of, some developments allowed for a richer material culture to develop. Cities started to develop more quickly. Population started to recover from Black Death. Get my dates right here. Yeah, these sorts of things are going on. And so you do get this greater emphasis on material culture, in part because there is more material stuff around. And that is absolutely central to that. Like markets, like you say, start being licensed. And this, again, just back to the earlier question about middle-class values. One of the things that's hard for us to imagine is spending money and going to a market used to be highly restricted. Like if you had to get a license, and usually markets were set up outside of a city because they were considered disruptive, like commerce, unchecked, unregulated, unverified commerce was considered to be a threat to the state, a threat to the moral order, and very suspicious. And so fairs, sort of like the modern Renaissance fair that's supposedly a reenactment of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But what it does get right is it was this exterior thing that was out, usually outside of a city walls, and that let you have, again, commerce would take place. But it's like, who are these people? What is the stuff they're bringing? Well, who are they selling it to? Do they have the right to buy it? Are the right kinds of people buying the right kinds of things? So that was all heavily regulated, heavily inspected. Of course, people are always trying to get around this.
Mm-hmm.
But the notion that you would just get up in the morning and go, oh, I'm going to go down to the stores down the street and buy some stuff. Like, yeah, this is not how the ancient world worked all over the place. Ancient Athens, ancient Europe, ancient China, ancient everywhere tended to have, I mean, not tended to, they absolutely massive restrictions on who could buy what, how much they could buy, when they could buy it, what they could buy.
I didn't know that. Yeah, this is all new for me.
Yeah, it's because, and again, it runs so counter to our sensibility. But those markets are crucial because, of course, you know what people love to buy? Back to the mouse suit. They love to buy ribbons and pins. They love to buy frills. They love to buy lace. They love to buy, and so women would take a dress. Maybe everybody in the city has pretty much the same dress, but I was at the fair and I was able to buy just a little bit of lace, and so I sewed a little lace on my collar, and like ho ho ho, like I am looking sweet now, right? I'm pimped out and ready to roll, and that sort of desire is there. But traditionally, societies have said, no, 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 like limit, no, no. And of course, people fight back and there's all this, problem. But absolutely, the Renaissance is one of the key watershed moments when people started going, no, maybe this is a good. Maybe this is actually all right. Maybe this is something to strive for. Maybe we do want to pursue these kinds of things. But yeah, and so, but yes, absolutely, we are direct descendants of that.
Okay. Next questions from Bionic. I'm not sure how to say the last name there. Apologies about that. So this is a question about nepotism. So Americans, we're anathema to nepotism. We feel like you shouldn't cheat. You shouldn't have your brother come in to be the president of the company. You should put out a public post and interview everyone based on their merit. is this related to, how does that relate to American individualism? And is that something that's particular to America, or is that something that Western Europe also feels equally strong, or is there something special about meritocracy in American individualism?
Yeah. So one, again, great question. The one, Calvinism. My next letter is going to be on Calvinism, so this is going to play a very important part on this. But if you look at from the individualist perspective, so aristocracy was entirely based on family and who you know. Like this is all that mattered. You know, they would go to war with generals who were there because their grandfather had been a general and his grandfather had been a general. And so your family are generals. You may or may not have the vaguest notion of what is going on, but they would give like people captains. They'd make them ship's captains. And they're like, you know, have you ever been to sea? No. Why would I need to do that? Right. My forebears invented the ship, right? I don't need to have, oh, look, an ocean. Oh, it's awful wet out here, right? Like kind of, you know, like, wow, there's an aristocracy. So part of eliminating an aristocracy is to saying, no, people should be promoted by their personal merits. And again, back to the lecture on individualism, we kind of radicalized that and ran with it and said, we really, really, you not only do you not want to do it, but it's bad for you, right? Like it somehow ruins the person. Both the giver and the recipient are ruined when they do these sorts of relationships, because then you're not standing on your own. And again, it's better to be suckled by a wolf in a field than it is to inherit a farm, because that's just, you're not being you're not expressing yourself. You're just, you know, doing it. And so societies have very variable approaches to how much this has been, but historically speaking, this is madness. I mean, the whole point of most education systems prior to very recently, China was, I think, the first out of the gate with a civil service exam that said, you know what, let's stop appointing people because they're the brightest kid of the Duke of Lao, right? Like, you know, okay, that first son you had, okay, clearly we're not appointing him to anything, but that second son, he looks like he's pretty sharp. Let's put him in charge of the finances of the kingdom, right? Because you're the Duke of Lao and I need your support. And so that seems like a good deal. So for most of history, for most of everything was negotiated this way. By the way, all the way down to peasants. This was not just an aristocracy thing. So this is how farming used to work, because land ownership was tended to be sort of sketchy and shared, and you had communal farms and all this. And it's like, oh, who gets to collect wood off of that you know, acre of woods over there? Well, Jeremy gets to twice a year go collects 2 wagon carts full. And if Jeremy dies, then his wife can collect that. And one of his kids can, but not all of his kids, because then holy shit, we'll be out of wood. And so it's like, oh, but if my kid marries and then he dies, does, you know, so all they argued, not all they argued about, but one of the main things they argued about is which relationships allowed which people to have access to which resources and what obligations did that put on them. And so it wasn't just the aristocracy that did this. Is basically all societies were organized around these, you know, mutual reinforce who you know systems. Mm-hmm. Having a sense of an abstract, arbitrary system that tried to measure the worth of the person who you didn't know. Now, this is the key. The idea here is you're measuring the worth of someone who is essentially a stranger. Think about how recent it is of a world where you dealt with strangers. That's a new thing, right? Like you would almost certainly have known people or have a very direct reference for someone who is applying for any kind of important position. But now it's like, oh, we've got, you know, 300+ million people in the country, and we have this weird, you know, specialty that we need. What are the chances I know someone who, you know, can fix a satellite in orbit? Like, I didn't, you know, I didn't go to school with anybody who did that. I went to school and studied, you know, French literature. That was great. But I need a satellite fix. God damn it. I'm going to have to interview some people based on hopefully their merit. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that's a very different world. But yeah, we are theoretically, in function, we're not at all, of course, but theoretically, we're strongly opposed to nepotism and that sort of handing things down.
And compared with, say, Western Europe, do we have a particular anathema to nepotism? Is it very American, or is it
I
something
think
that
I mean, they've tried to sort of fight against it in Western Europe, England, and all this, but not very successfully. Like if you look at the number of prime ministers and cabinet secretaries that have come from Oxford, Cambridge, Eton, Harrow, and whatever the other big school is, it's 80% in English history.
Mhm.
It's not just because they all know each other and went to the same school, but it's because they all know each other and went to the same schools, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's 100% that, right? And so, our such strong resistance to that is sort of unique. Plus, we don't have the institutions that have developed, right? So, maybe in another 100 years, the U.S. will have the institutions that allow us to take over all that, and then we will be happily nepotistic. And people
Yeah.
know. I'm just going to say, people know the origins of the word nepotism, right? Is from nephew. Hopefully, this is not false, fake news. I'm pretty sure. I've heard this many times, but now all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm saying this publicly. I better check this. So anyways, somebody check for me. But what I've heard and read actually is that it's from the word nephew, and it was retroactively applied because the popes were always promoting their nephews to positions of power in the Catholic Church. Because they wanted their sons, of course, to be wealthy and powerful. But of course, popes don't have sons, so it's always their nephews that get the promotions. Yeah. So if you're a pope and you have a kid, it all ipso facto becomes the kid of your brother or sister, and then you can promote those kids because that's fairsy squaresy.
Yeah, and do we do a pretty good job in America of avoiding nepotism comparatively, do you think?
Comparatively, but it also depends on how you score. But yeah, social mobility has gone down dramatically in the United States in the last 2 decades. But but if you look at the distribution, it's more class based, right? It's definitely who you know, but it's less directly it's genetic. Right. So if you look at boards of big banks like Jamie Dimon at Citigroup, yeah, is getting ready to step down. He's not promoting his daughter to be right. He's not like going, and my daughter is going to be. In fact, one of the criticisms that Trump gets, amongst many other criticisms, is that he just keeps putting his kids in all the important places, and people go, that's not good.
Right.
That's not good. You know.
All right. Vincent asks another prescriptive question. What comes next? God is dead, aristocracy is dead, land isn't abundant, and materialistic identity is dying. What fills this void? Similar question to last week. I just wanted I just need 3 easy solutions.
3 easy answers. Answer number 1, like, I have no idea.
Okay.
Answer number 2 is I'm hopeful. Because what would be nice was something that would be globally unifying. This is like the big dream, right? Of course, historically, this is the like most naive and stupid thing, but I'm going to go with it because I have a dream. And it is possible that something about the environment, climate change, cleaning up the world, improving like the global habitat for humans, if nothing else, hopefully we'll include a few animals along with that, but making the place nice for us is theoretically possible as a movement to unify enough people that it could actually become a replacement. So if people have read the Gaia hypothesis, it's a completely, I think it's a ridiculous as a scientific hypothesis that the world is a whole breathing, self-regulating, intelligent being that blah, blah, blah is basically a god. So that part I don't buy at all. But as an organizing principle for a new spirituality that would allow people to embrace a different way of life, a new set of values that might, allow us to improve our environments dramatically, I'm like, ooh, that looks like it could be a runner, right? Some version of that could actually potentially unite people, because it would be kind of a weird mix, which the whole hypothesis is anyway, of like sort of Hinduism, Buddhism, and some, odd nature worship, which, mix that together. So I could see that actually being functional. But one of the amazing things about all this is it's like the people prior to the Renaissance didn't see the Renaissance coming, right? Like it's just, these things, and often they're reconstructed historically, retrospectively, where you go, oh, look, that really was a significant change in the pattern of the way people lived and the outlook that they had. And so if we really do shift from materialism, which, like I said, hopefully we will, I just don't think it's a very helpful outlook. But one of the things it will do is destroy the world economy as we currently exist. So see, that's going to be a rough transition.
Right.
Because you're like, what is it, 60%? I give the number, I forget what it is. 65% of the U.S. economy is consumption, a consumer. And of that consumer consumption, let's just say 30% is totally random. Like, you don't have to do that. And that's conservative. It's way more than that. But let's just say 30%. Well, if we just extract 30% of global consumption, I mean, wow, like a 1% decline in global GDP is a catastrophic, event. I think during the global economic crisis, I think the 1 year there was a contraction of like 2.8%, something like that. Maybe it might have been a little higher, but 30%. Oh, so
yeah.
it wouldn't be a small shift. It would be a total transformation of the way our global economy works from top down. It'd be like getting rid of oil. So. So I have no idea. I kind of lean that way. The other thing that could happen, and this is just, again, idle speculation, there's a lot of evidence this is happening, by the way, is a increasing factionalization within some sort of loose global unity, but increasing not just nationalism, which we're seeing some of that, but actual, like, inside nations, like just really people go local, like ridiculously local. Like, okay, we're just, what do they call it? The West Coast of the United States is really going to just not necessarily break away formally, but we're just going to really focus on that and not worry about the rest of it. And so you would get this weird, massive cultural diversity rather than something that unifies us. Like I said, we sort of a naive dream of unity, and can't we all just get along? Probably that's maybe more realistic from a historical standpoint of radical diversity. Like, there isn't going to be one thing, there's going to be 100.
Gotcha. And the final question, a lot of people like the image of the house that you put on this lecture. One person posited that it's the Sopranos house, and one person asked if this is your house. And also there was a person who asked a question that we missed a few lectures ago that mentioned, they asked if you had shared, kind of why you had moved to France this time. And we don't need to get into that now, but I just wanted to mention it, that people were sort of curious, just, you've been in America for a long time and then now you're in France, and they were wondering, did they miss that? Did you kind of do a half lecture on that at some point? So just wanted to throw out the kind of lighter, funny house-related questions that were out there.
Yeah, so the house. No, it's certainly not my house. Good Lord, the house is horrible. I put that up there as to me the example of nihilistic materialism.
Yeah.
That move to France. I'll do a lecture on the move to France at some point. But part of it, as I mentioned at the beginning of this series, was to get a better understanding of American culture generally. And to experience a different culture, not radically different, right? I didn't move to the Sudan. I didn't move to the interior of Brazil, which I could have, but different enough, like a different language. Good Lord, they have a different word for everything, driving me mad. I got to learn that French, by the way. It's if you live as a lecturer and a writer, shifting over to a country where you're not literate is really a challenge, but it's good. It's a good challenge. Keep the mind fresh is what they say. So yeah, part of it was to reflect on that and to change and to, just do a new adventure, try something new and sort of challenge myself in new and different ways. But the house to me is kind of I like that picture because it is to me, it is the example of sort of the materialism that I was talking about, and the notion of you have a 2-car garage and you're not happy. So what you want is a house with a 3-car garage. Right? And if you have a 3-car garage, you're not happy. What you want is a house with a 4-car garage. And as I think I mentioned in the lecture, I was wandering around these neighborhoods And you could just see the progression. Like, this is, you're younger, you have 2 cars, and you get more successful, and older, you have 3 cars. When you get, really hit it, well, you have 4 or 5 or 6 cars. And I was thinking of the values question, because I do think, by the way, this notion of where values are is just core to understanding anything, and materialism and consumerism. And you go, okay, just as an exercise I wanted to give people on how deeply ingrained in this is in American society is, the next time something comes up, you have a problem, you're facing a difficulty, ask yourself, is there something I can get rid of that will help me address this? Is there something I can stop doing that will help me address this? Is there something I can not buy that will help me address this? Right? Because I'm absolutely not saying, oh, all you stupid people. I'm absolutely me as well. Like, this is because it's just so ingrained with us. If we have a problem, if we have a difficulty, is, oh, you want to lose weight, buy the blah, blah, blah machine. It's not like, go for a walk, because it's going to work just as well as any, exercise, whatever, all these exercises, equipment. But we're so bizarrely indoctrinated into the notion that every problem is solved by the purchase of something, that even when it doesn't work, like, how much exercise equipment that people don't use can you sell before people stop buying exercise equipment? Well, it turns out that is an unknown quantity. So the whatever hundreds of billions, I'll be interested to look that number up, but I'm just going to conservatively say the hundreds of billions of dollars that the US has spent on unused exercise equipment has not convinced us that buying exercise equipment is not really that helpful. That's not really the key. Because if it was, we would be a country of incredibly fit people. Oh, good Lord, would we be? We would be like all Olympic athletes, because we'd purchase so much exercise equipment. But that's how ingrained it is. And you can just look at this for whatever the problem is. It is, what is it I can buy that will do this? Help me lose weight, help me get ahead at work, impress my girlfriend, make me happier, improve my life. I don't know, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, somebody is selling it to you. Like I said, if anybody's, it's what's the Buddhist magazine again? I always love it because it's the best example of this.
I don't know.
Trillium. No, it's not Trillium. Shoot. Anyway, I think it's one of the biggest Buddhist magazines in the United States, if not the biggest one. And it's all ads for Buddhist stuff. And I'm like, yeah, there it is. Like, buy your way to Buddhism, right? And again, it's not that there's anything wrong with any particular item. Not that, maybe, a cushion to sit on would be great, and that's a nice one for meditating. Okay, meditating helps you. Okay, but you can meditate without the cushion.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've become convinced of is that you can't meditate without the cushion. You can't cook. In fact, France, the last note on this, I'll stop waffling on. One of the amazing things about France is people in France really do cook, and they make a lot of nice food. And where I am in France, in the Dordogne, the food is in France, people refer to the Dordogne as where good food comes from. So, I mean, the kitchens are tiny. The kitchens, even in houses that are large and have space, the kitchens are small. And I'm like, oh my God, like, how? So it turns out that having a big kitchen is in no way correlated with producing like food that is so good you just cannot believe it. Like, this is it might be nice to have a nice kitchen. It might be a great thing to have a big kitchen, but it's not necessary for cooking great food.
Right.
And what we have decided is, if you're gonna have your friends over and you want them to have a good time and everybody's enjoying themselves, then you need to have the big kitchen so you can all hang out in the kitchen, you cook, and you have all the appliances, and it all plugs in and everything is great. No, it turns out that French people will just all sit in a tiny kitchen and smoke and around a table and eat just miraculous food that I don't know how they do it, because I'm like, there's not a counter. You don't have a counter. Wait a second. How did you just make a 4-course meal without a counter? Right? From my American eyes, again, why I wanted to move. And so as an exercise to people, just write that down. And if people do this, I'd love to hear your experiences. I love these kinds of tests. I do it on myself, by the way, because I'm always trying to break these patterns. Just the next time you want to buy something that's not like, obvious, like I'm hungry, I'll buy some food, because that does work. But if it's like, I really, I want to do better or do more or something, go, oh, can I achieve that goal by not buying something, by stopping the purchase of something that's not helping or interfering with that goal? So people go, oh, I want to read more. It's like, great, cancel your cable subscription, cancel your satellite subscription, right? So now, you don't have access to that. And so that hopefully that will, make you a little more likely to read, because you've lost, and you're saving money.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy a lot of books for those expenses. And it's like, but don't think, oh, I need to buy. I just said buy a lot of books. See, it's so fucking hopeless. You do not need to buy the books. Most places have really nice libraries. Go to your great libraries. Go steal books from your friends, right? Steal them from grocery stores. There's all kinds of ways to get around this, right? But so I do think it's a great thought experiment to ponder, like, oh, what is actually I'm trying to accomplish, and I want to list everything before I get around to buying something, because that's so easy and so natural. You don't need to worry about it. You can do that in your sleep. It's the not doing it that's the really hard fucking part.
Right. Well, thank you, Wes, and thank you to all the questioners. We appreciate
thank you. Yeah, appreciate it very much. Thank you, Jeremy. That was great. But yeah, and thanks you guys for these questions. I mean, wow, such good questions. Like I said, it makes me just want to sit around and drink some wine and have long conversations about, should it be spiritual materialism, Christian? Why use the word materialism, right? Why don't we use the consumerism and all that? I think, those are great questions. So, all right. Thanks, Jeremy. I'll put my webpage on there, so it should be live for people who are interested. That's exciting for me, at least. And thanks for people who have signed up and people who have sent in a lot of inquiries, which is fun. And next time, Calvinism. So, oh my gosh, if you want to know, I don't know where to start. It's hard to unravel these balls of yarn, but Calvinism, this is going to be a big one. So, stay tuned for all the Calvinist religious theocracy you've been waiting for with bated breath. So, all right, guys, thanks a lot, and we will see you later.
All right, see you next time.